I do have hope when I see what they're doing. It makes me feel like there's hope. And they're trying hard because they're the early adopters, they're the entrepreneurial spirits. And to hear Derek Fildebrandt get up here and say, come on, compete with me, is amazing. It's an amazing thing to hear. It's the most inspiring thing I've heard yet among the independent journalists. And so if we all get together and just keep watching them, this idea of sharing their links is great. When I first saw Western Standard News, I thought, what the heck is this thing? This is the most professional outfit I've ever set eyes on. He knows how to make it look real, like we expect it to be. And then you've got somebody like Bright Light News, one guy, Glenn Jung. All he does is go to these massive conferences around North America and in Europe and interview everybody and just put the interviews out. And he does what the journalists in the mainstream no longer do. He simply asks a simple question and then listens to them. He lets the experts speak people in and have them participate in it. And what Jeff's publication does, the Epoch Times, is absolutely extraordinary. That was the first thing I saw when COVID first hit. It was still January 2020, and I opened that up and there was a timeline on how the World Health Organization delayed, on the request of China, the categorization of this as a pandemic for 2 weeks, just long enough for it to get out and spread across the world. And it was interviewing Canadian politicians complaining about this, and I looked at that and thought, that's what journalism is. This is how I was trained to practice journalism. And I wasn't seeing that in the Toronto Star or the Globe and Mail or the National Post. I was only seeing it in the Epoch Times, and I decided this is what I want to read, because I can decide if it's true, because I can look at it and it looks real to me. So I wanted to put to the panel the notion of a cooperative venture, not necessarily a totally competitive venture, and just to see what you guys think about it, or maybe you have any other ideas, because the CBC, the CTV, all the organizations I worked for, the Vancouver Sun, the Globe and Mail, they all have wire services. They don't print or broadcast 100% of what they show you every day. In fact, if you listen to the CBC, they're often reporting an Afghanistan story and signing off out of London. They don't even go there. They just say, well, that guy's just close enough. We'll put it, we'll let him do the story. But they have wire services that they contribute to, so that if they have somebody filming in London, they then give that footage to the wire service, to Associated Press or Reuters Television, and then they subscribe so that they can take a story that was shot out of Zimbabwe that afternoon, and they don't have to have somebody there. So I wonder if there's not a potential business model here that's based on a mutual benefit of paying into a system but getting as much out of it as you can, so that when somebody like Bright Light News goes to the World Council on Health and comes back with 40 interviews, you all have them because you subscribe to the same wire service. Maybe, Will, you can start by telling me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Rodney. I wanted to start by saying that I loved Derek's presentation, but Derek, I have to disagree with you on one thing. Yeah, not your competition. I look at all of you guys here as my partners, because and this is what Rodney has said very well, is it's our job as journalists to bring people the truth. And these people here are helping to bring the truth. And so we all have to be working to do this. One of the guys that I like to work with is Glenn Young at Bright Light News. It wasn't that long ago I interviewed Dr. Robert Malone. And the next day I got an email from Glenn saying, hey, could you give me an introduction? I'd like to interview him. I said, absolutely. Because it had been about 6 months before that he had interviewed somebody. And I saw his interview and said, hey, can you give me an introduction? I'd like to interview that person. Because we all have different audiences. And so the more of that truth that gets spread around between us, the more people hear that truth. And so I think what Rodney's proposing is fantastic. A wire system where we can all share what we've created and what we've found and what we've learned, so that that truth can be spread even farther.
And Serena, the work that you do is really first-person singular work. And I'm wondering if you think that you could benefit from something like that you could participate in, that other journalists who become journalists just because they're speaking, they have a point of view. I really liked your idea about creating a server on Treaty 8 territory and say, yeah, sure, come and get it. Do you have a comment on that?
Absolutely. So there is this thing called a sponsoring thought. And a sponsoring thought is our first and initial thought that we have about anything, any idea, anything we build, anything at all. And it's that sponsoring thought that our foundation is built on. So if our sponsoring thought around media, if we haven't done the work to look at what is not working in media, we cannot build a foundation that is strong and that is going to not be compromised. So the sponsoring thought itself, so when we talk about competition, that's a flawed sponsoring thought. When we talk about working together, because I was very touched by each and every one of you, what you spoke. It is our responsibility. That's why I stepped forward. And I'm not professional like the rest of you. I cry all the time. I get mad, I get passionate, I get silly, because I believe I need to show up authentically, because each and every one of you deserve that, because of the perversion that is taking place in society, in our media, in our government, in our healthcare. And so I'm not going to be in competition with anybody. I'm here because, as I said, I don't have self-aspirations in this. This wasn't a career goal. This is not where I imagined myself a year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. And this isn't where I imagined myself in 5 years. I'm doing this because this is my responsibility, and I have a gift that I can gift to this movement and to each and every one of you, as do each and every one of these gentlemen and many out there who aren't up here with us. So yes, I would continue to build in a way that we are allies and we are weaving together, because that's, to me, a stronger founding thought.
Thank you. Derek, you're a businessman, you're an entrepreneur. What do you think of because there's potential for all boats to rise with this tide if a small outfit can suddenly have access to so much that it can increase the amount of content that it churns out daily, increase its own audience, and that's our goal here, is to reach more people.
I have been very actively exploring this specific idea. In fact, I had meetings with my staff about this yesterday afternoon.
Hallelujah.
This is very hot on my mind. And it cuts a few ways. So I don't know if the average person out there really understands what a wire service is. It's a subscription. Like, you might subscribe to a newspaper, but your newspaper subscribes to the wire service, and it gives them a ton of content, and they've become more important to media than ever because the newsrooms have gotten so small. It's a cheap way to fill with...
They're also concentrated with that same ownership you described and that same messaging you described, so that
exactly.
The wire service can have a huge permeation of the thought process.
Yeah, and in fact, we're in negotiations with Canadian Press right now, the major wire service, and we had to reject the initial one because we just could not accept printing their stories verbatim, because we're not allowed to change them. We can't even change if a word is capitalized or not if it conflicts with our style guide. There's other models where they can give us some work, and there is good work out there, but it's more of like they give us stuff and we could take it and put it into our story. So we're in negotiations there. But I've been thinking about the idea of an independent media wire service for some time. It's got there's a lot of possibility to it. I've been reaching out to, and I say the word competitors, there's really kind of two. The government-funded guys, they're not even just my competitors, they're my enemy. The independent players, individual people like Freedom Bear, by the way, what an awesome name. I like my family name, but holy hell. Like Proud Bear, sorry, not Proud Bear, Freedom Bear. To the larger, more commercial companies, Rebel, Epoch Times, etc. But it's difficult. We're trying to find our way through to find an economic model that works. Because, some people, and I'm sure there's some on this stage, there might be some in the crowd, it's not your full-time job, it's not your business, you're just doing it because you love it and you want to change the world. But for some of us, it's our full-time job, and I've got people who are paying their mortgages and feeding their families on this. So it has to have an economic model that works. And wire services are not cheap. They're very expensive generally. And there's such a disparity in the size between a lot of the independent media. It could be one person who blogs once a week, and it could be the Standard with 20 plus full-time employees and another ton of freelancers. So there's such disparity in the ability of independent media to be able to buy into it. So anyways, this is my long-winded way of saying I am very actively seeking to build a model that works for it. And my hope is, and definitely no promises, but my hope is that perhaps within a few months we might be able to achieve something that'll raise the tide of all boats.
Jeff, does the Epoch Times subscribe to Wire Services, or do they generate 100% of their material themselves?
I can't answer that specifically, but when I read the Epoch Times, I never come across wire service stories. So I'm going to say they don't, but I'm sure they probably have. Well, the American bureau, they have overseas bureaus. They get their content from those bureaus as well, so that's probably what they rely on.
How big is the newspaper? How the full corporate machine?
I wish I could answer that. I mean, in Canada, we have grown ever since I started there, but that's not the reason. But I think we covered the truckers' convoy when nobody else did, the vaccine truth. These are things that were pulling people in, and my editor's trying to hire more and more reporters, and so we continue to grow. Our footprint in Canada continues to increase, but I can't give you numbers.
Yeah, I'm gonna shift the gear here, and I'm gonna start with you and come back, because I want to know if you have any thoughts on how we reach that, what they're calling the movable middle. You know, we're said to have 30% who are so easily hypnotizable, and the 30% who are represented by most of the people in this room who kind of got it from the beginning. Maybe we didn't figure it out in our heads, but our gut told us something's not quite right here. And then you've got that 40% in the middle who are the ones we need to get. The ones we need are new media to be able to reach, to convince with the truth. Do you have any thoughts on how to reach that movable middle that are going to win it for us?
I've thought lots about this, and I don't, again, have an answer, so I'm kind of a dud panelist right now, but the influence of social media, which I don't participate in, has the biggest reach, it seems, compared to any of us just doing something that's quality. Because you who come to Epoch Times or Western Standard, Will, Serena, you've already chosen to get our content. How do we get beyond that? It's a slow trickle of people that are coming to this side for their news, but the only avenue I think we can accomplish that is through the social media element. We're going to have to get some young, savvy people that subscribe to what we're talking about as far as journalism goes, and have them be the ones that take their tech abilities and their outreach to try and spread that word. That's the only thing I've ever been able to come up
No,
with.
and it's a salient point, because I noticed on the National Citizens Inquiry, they have something like 7,500 followers, but when they put my testimony out on Twitter, it reached 100,000 very quickly. So, Derek, do you use the social media to boost the main website material that you generate?
It's, when I talked about the barriers to entry, that's the biggest thing. So, you know, if we had, the original Western Standard was a print magazine, and that required hundreds and hundreds, actually around $1 million in capital to start it up. You had to buy printing presses, distribution systems, postage. It was grossly expensive. When we started the Western Standard in just like October 2019, it was like me and my news editor at my kitchen table in pajamas. And we used social media. So we've got Bill C-18 coming right now. I talked about it very lightly in my presentation, but it is just to take money from Facebook and Google. And God, I hate defending them, but on this one issue, they're not the bad guys. The government and the grifting, greedy media executives are. The idea is, oh, okay, thanks. They're trying to say that, so like, okay, when I was a kid, my first job was a paper boy, small town, Ontario. And the newspaper would pay me to deliver their product to their customers. I even did it by a dog sled in the winter. I had a modified GT racer in my Husky. And yeah, you're in Victoria, you don't have snow. But now, the newspaper boy in 2023 is Facebook, and it's Google, and Twitter. Very rich, overpaid paper boys, but they're the paper boy, and they do it for free. You don't have to pay some punk kid to do it. But they've got it backwards, and now the government is saying that they need to pay the newspapers for the privilege of delivering their content to readers, people whose eyeballs get you advertising revenue, people who could turn into paid subscribers. It is absolutely ass backward, and Facebook has said it's going to just shut the news off in Canada if this bill passes, and that's why I was trying to get an exemption to this bill so that we don't get caught up in that. We probably will end up getting caught up in it. So social media as a way of independent media getting its content, getting its message out to people could change radically in Canada very soon, because these companies, as bad as they overall are, they're dead right when they say we are not going to pay media companies for doing them the biggest favor anyone's ever done them short of government media subsidies. And so it's going to have a dramatically negative impact on the ability of independent media who rely more on social media than the traditional media to do it.
Is there a workaround to that? Should it occur, which it sounds like it may?
Well, I was testifying at the Senate committee that's going through this, and there were some sympathetic senators, including some lefty Trudeau-appointed ones, who, I was telling them, like, it is a violation of our common law for the government to force two unwilling parties to have contract with one another. The government can't force you to hire me if you don't want to hire me and I don't want to work for you. But the government is saying Facebook and the Western Standard must have an agreement together, and neither Facebook nor the Western Standard want to have an agreement. I'm happy with the current arrangement. You give us free delivery for stuff and we make money. That's a good arrangement. I like that. We get our content out to readers, people get informed, we get subscribers, everyone wins. So I was there trying to get carve-outs in the bill so that we don't get caught up in it. There's one weird potential carve-out we could unintentionally get. There was some crazy guy representing a certain religious organization who was testifying before me, and he was arguing that there should be none of this free Google and Facebook money to media that said offensive things about Islam. And when I went up to the Senate, when I was speaking, I said, alternatively, if you won't amend the bill, I will voluntarily have us labeled a hate organization if it means you'll stop trying to regulate us. So that's our way. So if we can become a hate organization, we could maybe get exempted from the bill.
Well, hate is a word that's being expanded in its definition, so you may.
In this case, is the one time I might welcome the label if it means that the government will stop trying to regulate our private contracts with other businesses.
So, Serena, you might be the only one we can listen to now. If we can't get media, there's mainstream media or even the alternative media, the new media, that's all you do is social media, right? You're direct to social media.
That's right. Okay, first I want to address something because we're talking about truth and we're talking about media. And so I need to address an untruth that is moving across this table numerous times now. My name is not Freedom Bear. That's the alias I came out with.
We all thought it was Miracle.
And there are a lot of people who always ask me if
Good
that's my
fake
name.
news.
That
Go
is
with
not
it.
a legal
Go with
name.
it.
But I needed to tell the truth there. You see how that's done? So the other thing I want to
Ladies and gentlemen.
The other thing I want to address, though, is a couple things here. You spoke about hate, and I know we all kind of giggled a little bit there, but that's actually something I've been talking about since I campaigned in the municipal elections in the fall, that anti-racism and the hate speech and the phobic this, and that whole narrative, and trying to amend the International Human Rights Act so that we can see the prosecution of human rights violators when we were deemed the ones who were human rights violators. So I actually don't think that in any way that, and I know you were being cute there, but that isn't going to help us in any way getting our name out there, because this is how they will continue to censor us and prosecute us. So looking at social media, I have a friend who worked at Global, and she left Global because of what was going on there. She was actually trying to do an interview of me, and they wouldn't allow it. And so she actually moved to Brussels and is working in media there. And she went to a conference with 12 other countries, or so journalists from different countries, and the majority of them didn't know what was going on here when she talked about the convoy and what took place in Ottawa, which was shocking. But she said to me something quite interesting. She said, Serena, out of everybody that I've gone to school with in journalism who have tried to build a platform, you have far exceeded their reach and their platform. People are listening to your voice. You have people listening. And one of the things that we explored, I'm going to go back to the question that you had for Jeff there. One of the things that I'm exploring as a tactic is recognizing that we have been effectively muted to the rest of society because of the language we use. It's inflammatory. And so while we understand it, we don't need to be an echo chamber anymore. We need to be responsible with our voices, our language, the way we report and what we share. Because what we are sharing is reputable. We have the sources, we have the references, we have the experts. And so now we need to find the way to share it. And I have a short story. I was invited because of the Supreme Court granted the injunction to the government of BC for the mountain highway overpass over Highway 1 outside of Vancouver. And I was invited last week to come and report on this. And so I did, and I made it very clear that I was there not as a protester, but as alternative media. And I interviewed the police, and the very first interview I tried to obtain was actually the Minister of Transportation, who were quite rude and dismissive of me. However, as I continued there and asked questions about the injunction and wanted to know information, and I was respectful and my language was not inflammatory, I was pursuing the truth. And I was sharing the truth, and I was doing it respectfully. And I could see in that police officer's eyes as he was speaking to me, something was shifting in him. I could see that I was not meeting his stereotype of who he had been told we were and what we represented. And then as I walked away, the Minister of Transportation said, "Excuse me, I listened to your interview and I heard your questions, and I'd like to refer you to our media person for an interview." That's how you make a difference with your words. And not only that, yesterday I had the honor of being at my favorite coffee shop, my secret, not so secret, second office. And it's actually the same place where I ran into Jagmeet Singh the day after the NDPs had denied me access to their open house. It was Alistair McGregor and Jagmeet Singh. The very next day, I ran into Jagmeet Singh and had an opportunity to tell him my disappointment in him and his profiling of me and discrimination. Yesterday, I had the honor of running into Alistair McGregor, and he was having lunch with his father, and his father was not pleased that I politely interrupted their lunch. And so I seized that opportunity respectfully to solicit a meeting with his office to discuss so that I didn't need to interrupt his private time with his father. And he accepted. So I'm not going to go there as a disgruntled constituent. I'm going there because now I have the ear of one of our politicians, and I'm going to go there with some of the matters that are most pressing and need to be addressed respectfully with proper sources and resources. That's how you make a difference.
I think that's an excellent point, Serena, and I think that's what this panel represents, is the dialing it down so that we're talking about facts, we're trying to conduct journalism, two sides of the story, if there are two sides of the story, or if there are more sides of the story, and that's why we see success among those who are on this panel. The ones that are shouting and yelling and accusing or going off into areas that might feel like they need a little bit of verification are the ones that aren't helping the cause. So I want to just move toward wrapping it up, starting with you, Will. Everybody here got to this level of where you are in the last 3 years because of what happened. So now here we are, and we're looking back a little bit. We've got the Citizens Inquiry. We're trying to figure out how it happened, why it happened, how not to make it happen again. But we need this new media not to be a blip. We need it to be the new foundation of what media is. Where do you see it going from here? How can our audience help? How can we create a solution together to move this forward, to catapult it forward? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to start by briefly addressing your first question about, because it's relevant to your next one.
Feel free.
Of how do we reach those people who are in the middle? Because that's really the war, isn't it? I mean, you folks are all here because you already know the truth and you came to get more of it. But how do we get through to the people who, well, they kind of suspect something's not right, but they're programmed to watch the mainstream news, and so they keep getting bombarded with these lies. The question that I get an awful lot from people is, I mean, how big is your team, Will? Because your presentation is so professional. Well, our team is minuscule. Our team, when we started, was me. And it's not much bigger than that now. But there's a reason why I strive for that professionalism. Because when you look like someone and sound like someone that people should listen to, then they listen to you. And they share your content. And you get people who are in the middle who start watching it and listening to it. We launched our YouTube channel about Christmas time. We have 6,000 subscribers on it already, and we haven't even been trying. We've just been posting stuff. So that's important, because where do we see this going? Well, I love Rodney's idea of a wire. Let's get all of these organizations, all these media organizations working together. Let's create a network of what the media is supposed to be. People who tell you the truth. For God's sakes, we're supposed to be the fifth estate. We're supposed to be the ones who keep an eye on the government and keep them honest. Not the ones who are being paid by them to be mouthpieces. And all of us up here are trying to do that. We're trying to hold these people accountable. And so, if we work together, if we are professional in our presentation, if we work our asses off to find and bring people the truth, if we moderate our language so that we are respectful and worth being listened to, we will gradually gain the respect of those who are uncertain. And in time, we will replace the state-sponsored media.
I think we're going to call it the Truth Wire, okay? So that's free for you, Derek. Serena, do you have thoughts on where we're going next? Where we're going to move forward from today? How our audience can help?
I wouldn't be being honest and truthful and authentic if I got up here and just fed you rainbows and twinkles. That's not who I am. I see that with what is happening with the legislation, that this is going to continue, and they're going to continue to choke our voices. And so, as I said previously about the foundation, I think we have a beautiful sponsoring thought. I believe we've already built the foundation, and I know that we will need to continue to pivot and adjust. I can't say, I would be lying if I said that I knew what the answer is. I think collectively we are the answer. And we will just keep doing, we will just keep rising, we will just keep coming back. And we will adjust as we need to because we are a determined, tenacious, ethical group of people.
Thank you. Jeff, do you have any thoughts about what we need? How can people help? What is going to be the next step?
See, my whole platform is my disgust with what has happened to an honorable profession to what it is now. And what I want to see done is to see our media outlets and the people that are reporting to be held accountable. It's not that easy to kind of break through. I mean, if you contact a reporter, they're probably just going to re-engage by calling you a name or something. If several people contact the editor might respond, but I don't think so much in today's day and age. Believe me, Rodney, I've been thinking about this a lot, and there's fewer trained journalists that are coming into the field now. They're not being trained by a mentor. They're not doing the gumshoe work of learning how to find stories. And all of the shortcuts that are being taken and the misrepresentation is all accepted. And as a public, we're not fazed by it anymore. We just accept it. I want to see our media accountable. And I guess if we all, like Serena said, collectively let our voice be heard, maybe that would start making a difference. But it is a bleak outlook in that regard. I'm very encouraged to see and hear what you guys have all said. And I truly am hoping that we will slowly but surely gain ground back so that there is some integrity that can return to what, like I say, used to be a noble profession. So I wish I could give you a better answer, Rodney.
No, that's fine. Derek, I want to leave it with you. We're getting close to our time, and God forbid we should end a little early. But in the end, if anyone else has something to say that I haven't asked, please just raise your hand. But I wanted to end it with Derek about your thoughts about what's next. What's the next? Well, I want to say the next 3 years because it's been 3 years, but I don't think we have 3 years. A friend of mine was the CEO of Microsoft Canada for 15 years. And he told me he watched Bill Gates invent a program he called Rolling Thunder. And Rolling Thunder, if you remember when Windows came out, dropped a banner down the CN Tower one day so everybody had to pay attention. But the very next day, they drop one down the Eiffel Tower, and then they drop one down the Sydney Opera House, and then they drop one down the Space Needle, and then the next day, by the end of the week, it was down the Tower of London. And the whole world had to pay attention to this marketing campaign, and Bill Gates is in charge of this one too. So it keeps changing. We can't keep up. We can't pivot and formulate a response because there's another terrible thing coming down. So maybe it's the next 3 months. Maybe it's the next 6 months, but what's the next move? How do we build from what you and the other independent media have invented over the last 3 years?
I think the question builds well on, I think, what I was trying to overall communicate in my presentation. So the opening slide titled my presentation, Survival of the Fittest in Canadian Media. Economics. In a free economy, economics is nature. The weak will die. The strong will survive and thrive and adapt. It's the same thing in economics and nature. They're the same thing. Free enterprise nature is not directed by a government. It happens naturally, just as nature happens. Survival of the fittest, evolution. They happen without us making it do that. But when governments get involved in an economy, or God forbid in the press, they're trying to play God. They're trying to push it in a particular direction. And if there is a God, he is welcome to do that. But my government is not. as counterintuitive as it might seem, I am bizarrely encouraged by how strongly the Canadian federal government is trying to put down the independent media and hold up the legacy and mainstream media, because that says to me that we're winning. They wouldn't need to do this if things were going their way. Those media, they're not dying, they're already dead. They've just been reanimated like Frankenstein. And they're kind of stumbling around, broke, bankrupt, morally and financially. And the government is trying to push them along because they need them to prop them up. But people have tuned them out. Every year, we see record declines in their readership, record declines in their viewership and their listenership. No matter what the government does trying to play God, it can't beat a force of nature. So, I'm not saying they're the dinosaurs and we're the asteroid, but I am saying at the very least, they're the candle and we're the light bulb. And you can subsidize the candle all you like, but there was no way to stop the light bulb conquering the candle. Thomas Edison, who claims to have invented the light bulb, he said, "We will make electricity so cheap that only the rich will buy candles. Well, we will make the media so good that only the government will pay for the old media." So, be optimistic. We're winning the fight, and the surest sign that we're winning it is that the government tries so damn hard to tip the scales against us. It's a matter of time, perseverance, and just being better at our jobs than they are.
Thank you. I think you make a key point about them trying to play God. And I think that there's a reason we're in a church right now. And it's because the churches, the smaller churches, the independent churches, are the ones whose congregations have been supporting this movement. And I hear it time and again. I hear it from people that I don't expect, who have seen things that I've said and been recorded as saying, "I saw you there. Keep doing it. You're doing a good job." And they're always the people who are churchgoers. And I'm going to give you all a little tip. Interview as many of their pastors as you can, because they'll all watch you. And then they will all share you. And then you will grow. The lowest hanging fruit is the one to be plucked right now. That will help speed. I strongly suggest you interview the pastor of this church. Why do you let the We Unify group meet here? Why did you let this group? And then there's a story. They'll all watch it. They'll all show their friends and their cousins, and then they'll see your media. Do what you can to try to reach that congregation, because they vote. Now, we have a few minutes left. Is there anything that you wanted to say? Well, I'll start with this side of the table, and then we'll go to Serena.
Yes, thank you, Rodney, because I do have something very important I want to tell you. Something that people are very, very concerned about are these censorship bills. The truth doesn't do any good if you can't get it. And so a lot of you are concerned that the government's going to shut us down, that you're not going to be able to access that information anymore. Well, before I was a freedom fighter, and I was a freedom fighter before I was an independent journalist, I was a web developer. And I like to say they pissed off the wrong guy. Because there are ways around that censorship. There are. There's already, on ironwillreport.com, a 9-part series on protecting your privacy. And I'm working on a series on getting around the censorship. And so please, go to ironwillreport.com, sign up, and you'll find out, because you'll get our email or get our newsletter, and you'll know when that series comes out. And we don't just do interview series. Every once in a while, I do a practical tutorial on how to do certain things, because I recognize not everybody is computer literate. But one of my former jobs, careers in my life, I was a technical writer. It was my job to explain complicated things in simple language that anyone could understand and follow. So I'm not just going to tell you that there are ways around the censorship, I'm going to show you how to get around the censorship.
go to the Iron Will report and learn how to get around the censorship. Serena.
Thank you, Will. I'm going to echo some of the other sentiments here tonight. A few of you mentioned this, and this is something I was saying yesterday as well. One of the biggest mistakes they made was that they squeezed us all so tight in every sector, from healthcare to education to media, our food security, all of it. And what it did was it brought us all together. It showed us our strength. It gave us our courage. It showed us how determined and tenacious we really are and what we have to bring forward. I'm honored to be sitting with some of you whom I have watched previously, and I know you come from a different background than I do with your media, and some of us are grassroots, but you can see it takes all walks, and I think what we're building is powerful and it's beautiful. I'm also sit on a council called CATS. It's a national council, CATCS. That's Community Accountability Transparency Councils. And it's a network that's being built in every municipality across Canada. And it's about holding your government accountable on a municipal, provincial, and federal level. Everywhere they push, we push back. And we are actively forming this. You can go to catcs.org. We have our first campaign out, which is called Stop Cancel Culture. And this is something that we are wanting others to come and take a look at and see how you can be a part of it. Now, I guess my final words are, remember that we need to be more than that which we call out, always. Which means we've always got to look at ourselves, weigh ourselves, and we've got to refine ourselves. We've got to do better each day and every time we come back, which means when we see the power of cancel culture or censorship or, right now the human right violations and the hate crimes and the anti-hate and phobic this and anti-that, we can see the power of how that can be used to censor and shut down dialogue, discussion, and to be able to refute information. And so we need to be aware and conscious that we are not participating in that, in supporting any legislation that actively does that to others, because this is just as counterintuitive. That's what they do, is they manipulate us to think that these are the things that are going to protect us, serve us, and raise our voices. They do this to every sector of society, every group. And so we need to remember that in this movement and in our media, is that we don't become that which we call out.
Thank you. I think that's critical, absolutely critical. We've got about 2 minutes left. Did either of you have anything else you wanted to say, or we're going to donate the time to the washroom break?
You already told me I had the last word and then took it away from me.
That's a little trick, wasn't it? Us media people do that. My apologies, Derek. I think you just had it, though. It has been my tremendous honor to stand before these people who are doing that which I am envious of. They are speaking the truth to people on a daily basis and informing us of something that we can't find. And they're continuing to find a larger and larger audience, which begins tonight. Your assignment is every morning when you wake up and you go on the computer, hopefully you go outside and get some sunshine first. You first log on to all of them. You see what you like and you forward it to one person, thinking that they might learn something that day. And if that starts with the people in this room, it can only grow from there. Thank you very much.